guys? Welcome to another episode of The Meaning of Podcast. I am Ace.
This is RB3.
And this is the podcast where we talk about all your favorite film directors and the deeper meaning within their films. And this episode is a very special episode because we're going to be talking about a younger director, a director who has a smaller filmography, but a director that has had an impact on Hollywood already, and that is Damien Chazelle. We're going to be talking about his new movie in theaters now, First Man. We're going to be giving our short, brief review on that movie. We're going to be giving our hot takes on that movie. I'm sure RB3 has a few because that's what he does. He's got a pocket full of hot takes, and he's just pimping them out, tossing them all over the air like it's raining hot takes, man.
It's raining takes.
That's what RB3 does. We're going to be doing all that great stuff. But before we do that, we're going to read your comments. But before we even do that, I want to give a shout out to RB3 with your new short film, man. Flick Ticks.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. Flick Tick. Yeah. You pronounced it. We'll figure out the pronunciation. Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Flick Ticks.
I don't really know exactly how to pronounce it.
It's Flick Ticks, I think, right?
Yeah, with CK.
Yeah, you got the great Ken Knapsack in the leading role. You got supporting role of intern Max
and
Max.
Copster.
Yeah. I mean, we make a cameo.
Appearance.
But supporting role,
Max.
It's Max.
Yeah.
And you make an appearance as an investor in there, man.
Yeah, I didn't want to, but there's nobody else available, so
you got a good cast, man. Your homie, what's his name? Is it Cade?
Yeah, Cade. He's my buddy, and we were just on Knapsack Files.
That's
great,
great,
coming
man.
out today too. So
if you haven't done so already, go check out Flick Ticks on YouTube.
Yeah.
What's your YouTube channel called again? Is it Burning Ashes?
It's just my name. So
Robert Butler.
Yeah, Robert Butler there.
Got
and I'm gonna put the link in the description. So
there you go.
If you're listening on iTunes too, it's gonna be there as well.
You don't even have to type it in, guys.
Type it in. It's right there.
It's right there. You can just come to the YouTube page, and if you want, guys, you can leave us a comment on the YouTube page too.
Hey.
And if you do, we might read your comment, kind of like we're doing right now from last week's episode where we talked about John Carpenter with Copster. Shout out to Copster. Movie Ace says, I think people are too used to the overly polished cliche Hollywood studio movies would react negatively to the auteurs of the 70s and 80s like De Palma, Carpenter, Cronenberg, where they have distinct style and they haven't all done more commercial films. Although they have done all more commercial films. Got you. I mean, a lot of it is style. A lot of it is cuts. The editing has changed quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, but, like, people like De Palma and Carpenter, I always feel like we're ahead of their time when it comes to, like, a lot of the filmmaking aspects. It's just it was so radically different. And, like you said, it became more polished over time. Like, over time, people took De Palma's style and then made it, like David Fincher, for example. David Fincher is a prime example of somebody who's directly influenced by David De Palma, but instead of doing the crazy zooms and the weirder aspects that
directors are doing now.
That De Palma was doing. Fincher kind of reinterprets that into his own kind of style, his own kind of mythology, and I think that's the same with like a lot of directors from that time too. So. I mean, even when we're going back and rewatching the old John Carpenter movies, you could definitely see the modern influence that John Carpenter has now on a lot of modern horror directors. But because the technique has taken more time to develop and be seasoned over time, it's a lot more polished now.
It is. It's interesting what has changed. I think look has changed quite a bit, especially when it comes to the word stylistic, right? When it comes to that word, we think of Tarantino, we think of Snyder, we think of directors who are very much doing something over the top on purpose. I don't know if that's the right word, over the top, but doing something very distinct on purpose, like a Snyder, like a Tarantino. I don't know what's another director you can call stylistic, but there's a ton of them.
Edgar
Wright, that's a perfect example of people who are making something a little bit extra on purpose to get audiences to kind of relate to that little extra, whatever, if it's Snyder, Tarantino, Edgar Wright, that little extra amount that audiences like. Audiences like to
personality,
to have that little extra in there. And I think, like you said, Carpenter had that too. Yeah. So, shout out to Movie Ace. Montgomery Jackson says, were either of these guys born in the early 80s? No, nope. Montgomery Jackson. And I don't really think it matters, man. Again,
I don't know if was that a compliment or an insult? Or
it was definitely an insult.
Really?
At least that's how I take it. I mean, we've talked a lot about it. At least I've talked a lot about it on this podcast, about how this weird misconception of like intelligence related to age, or like I don't know, like experience related to age, or where it's like, oh, these guys can't talk about the movies because they weren't born in the 60s. And it's like, dude, no, come on, stop. We don't need 50-year-old dudes telling us the same thing over and over again just because they saw the movie in theaters. It doesn't mean your opinion on the movie is better than my opinion, or it's more qualified than my opinion because you saw the movie in theaters.
Yeah.
That's just my take, man. I mean, I don't know.
Well, I don't really know, like, especially for people who are like from the 80s. And once you care more about like people who weren't from that time, like talking about your movies. Yeah.
I think people, we live in a society now where it's just reinforcement, right? We just want to be around people who think the same way we do and who have the same opinions we have. So I guess that kind of goes hand in hand with older movies. I don't know. There is I've said it a million times, there is a weird, odd fascination with people who are older talking about the movies that were older. And I don't know why that is the case, because I feel like, if anything, people who are older should appreciate the younger generation who is appreciating the movies you grew up with.
That's
right?
what I'm saying. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Shouldn't you be like, oh, these kids are actually liking our movies, or my movies. Like, this is my era and they're liking it. I think that would be a little bit more of a better opinion. I don't know.
Yeah, Gen X is trash.
Yeah. For
millennials too. I mean, that's millennial generation, right? Like,
yeah,
you're born in the 80s or whatever?
No,
that's also technically.
No, because I'm a millennial too, so I forget.
If you're born like someone, I don't know, whatever. Anybody
You're
born
all
in the 80s
trash.
is trash. Anybody born in the 80s is trash.
Yeah, anyone in the 80s is trash. 80s 73 says, I think They Live is still my favorite Carpenter movie. If you haven't checked out Cigarette Burns from the Masters of Horror anthology, it's a true masterpiece.
Yeah.
Huh, I don't think I've heard of that. Have you?
I guess that's one of his more offshoot
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, obviously we talked quite a bit about They Live because I feel like that's, like I said in last week's episode, is his most very on the nose, not subtle movie that he has on his resume. At least I think it's his most like on the nose type movie. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's also his most like anti-capitalism movie too, like we kind of discussed last week. So.
With his messaging, with his, you know, what he's trying to say in his movies, because that's kind of the whole point of this podcast. I feel like They Live is the one that's like, it's not telling you what he's trying to say, it's screaming at you what he's trying to say. Yeah, which is great. I think that works from time to time. Now let's get into this week's episode, where we will be talking about Damien Chazelle. As I said earlier, Damien Chazelle just has a movie in theaters called First Man. It just came out this weekend, and that is kind of why you came up with doing Chazelle on this week's episode. And I can't lie, man, as soon as you texted me that, I was like, I love Damien Chazelle, man. Hey. I loved Chazelle. I've seen all of his movies quite a few times.
Do you like a jazz?
I love jazz. Yeah, I know. It's like, I created jazz. Oh, you haven't seen that SNL sketch with Ryan Gosling?
Yeah, I've seen that.
Oh, my God. Yeah. He's like, I made jazz. He's like smoking a cigarette and stuff. Oh, no, save jazz is what he says. He's like, I saved jazz. But yeah, I love Chazelle. I love, obviously, La La Land. I talked a lot about it when it came out that year. I remember seeing it the first night when it just came out, and I walked out and I was like, oh, damn, I love that movie. Whiplash, I remember seeing that movie at home and just going nuts, going crazy for that movie because it was a crazy movie. Yeah. And now First Man is in theaters, and everyone has opinions about it. So let me break the ice by saying this. First Man does not seem like a cheap movie, and it did not make a lot of money. So I don't know what you think about that, but for me, I was like, oh, damn.
How much money did it make?
It's $16 million opening weekend.
I mean, that's pretty good, right?
No, it's not.
What kind of budget are we talking here?
I think it was a big budget, man. Let me check it out. But I'm either way, 16 mil, I don't think it's what they wanted.
But, I mean, this movie's probably going to have a lot of legs.
Like 25 million would be like, all right, that's not bad. But 16 mil? Oh, well, I mean, think about other space movies. Think about Matt Damon's movie, The Martian.
But that's sci-fi. I mean, this is not sci-fi. This is a biopic. Like, how about compared to other biopics? How does it open, like, compared
probably to pretty bad. I mean, 16 mil is pretty rough, man.
I think this movie has a lot of legs. So I think this movie, I think they weren't planning for a big like spread like initially.
60 million budget.
60 million budget?
60 mil.
So they probably got to make somewhere around 200 million to break even.
I mean, dude, do you see it doing that?
I can see it.
I don't know, man.
I mean, it's an Oscar movie, so it's going to have legs throughout the season.
Is it, though? Because for me, I keep thinking about how the fact that A Star Is Born is a movie that came out a week before, and that's an Oscar movie too, and it's low-key competing with First Man because it is an Oscar movie, and the fact that A Star Is Born is doing way better.
But A Star Is Born has Lady Gaga.
No, but you don't see what I'm saying. I'm saying the Oscar people who want to go see Oscar films might go see A Star Is Born versus First Man, or might go see Bohemian Rhapsody instead of First Man. So I don't think the legs are really going to hold up, is what I'm saying. And I find that disappointing because I like Damien Chazelle, and I feel kind of bad because you can tell he gave his heart into this movie. But it just, I don't know how it's going to do box office wise. I don't even think it's going to have a great, Oscar run or awards contender run. That's just my opinion after seeing the movie. Yeah. I mean, at first I was like, oh, this is going to win all the Oscars. But now I'm like, maybe, because a lot of people had a lot of takes on it. But I want to hear the most important take, and that is RB3's take on this movie.
First Man.
RB3, what is your opinion of this movie?
I really enjoyed this movie, man.
Okay.
I thought this movie was definitely one of, I mean, it's not necessarily to the heights of like La La Land or Whiplash, but you can't really expect somebody's like third movie to be that, especially when it's not a musical, and it's a whole biopic and everything, right? I really enjoyed it. I mean, I thought it's funny you compared it to A Star Is Born. I think probably the bigger comparison outside of the opening weekend to me is how close in style they kind of relatively are, right? They both kind of adopt this like really shaky, really close up, very intense, like personal kind of style to it. To both of their subject matters, except A Star Is Born is not a real story. This is a real story. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, I can only really, I mean, if I'm being honest, I can only really have a certain level of enjoyment for it. And, you're going to think I'm crazy when I say this, but I said before on this podcast, I really kind of don't believe that the moon landing happened. So I'm going to have a hard time.
I thought you were joking when you said that, RB3. I thought that was a joke.
So I have a hard time enjoying a movie named First Man. Oh, my God.
Come on, man. Don't be that guy. Man, I'm begging you, RB3. Don't be that guy.
It's like, why am I watching a soundstage of a soundstage,
This is some bullshit, bro.
They're like, oh, we shot on IMAX. It's going to be this premium experience. No, I'm kidding.
Okay, I was going to say, bro. I'm kidding. We'll get into it. If you want to get into it, I'll get into it. Conspiracy theory shit.
But outside of that, it truly, I thought it did everything really well. I thought it was a very good like POV movie. I don't know. It just didn't. The ending kind of meandered a little bit to me.
Sure.
I think it ended in not as strong as a fashion as it started. But
so you thought it was okay? Is basically your take on it?
I don't think it's okay. I think it's better than okay. I mean, it's probably in my top 8 movies of the year. Yeah, something like that. But
interesting.
It's not like. It's definitely not like number one. I wasn't like blown away by it, but it was good.
Yeah. My first thing that I'm gonna say, RB3, about my opinion on this movie is holy shaky cam, RB3. Holy shaky cam. This movie made me sick. I can't lie, man. I saw this on Saturday night and I had to get up early Saturday morning, so maybe that kind of had an effect on me. But I can't lie. I was like, oh my God, this camera is literally like trying to make a move and like going left and right. And I was like, why? We're just having a conversation between two people. Like, why so much shaky cam? I don't know. That's my biggest thing from it, man. It took me out of the movie.
But you don't. Okay, wait.
It took me out of the.
We didn't talk about Star Is Born though. Do you not like A Star Is Born for the
This one quadruples the shaky cam compared to A Star Is Born.
Really?
Way more. A Star Is Born had a little bit of shaky cam. This one was like all shaky cam.
But then
they had like literally classroom settings where it was like, I'm the professor, and it's like the camera's going, and I'm like, why? We're having a classroom setting right now. Why does there have to be a crazy?
They just got out at that point. They just got out of the
but now you're just sitting in the classroom and the camera's going, and I'm like,
still spinning in their heads like.
The whole time, the camera was like doing like vertical loops, and I'm like, I get it during the scenes of like the space stuff, and I'm like, okay, he wants to put us in the shoes of the astronaut, where you're feeling a spaceship and it feels weird and you're shaking and you're spinning. Yeah, of course. But when you're having a conversation with your wife and the camera's like shaking like crazy, I'm like, dude, this is too much for me. I don't know if I can't. I just couldn't get into it. After
wait. So here's my question. When you have that criticism, do you look at a movie that is, if you look at a movie like 13 Hours, right, that we talked about on the Michael Bay episode, and that movie also contains shaky cam throughout for the most part, even during the dialogue scenes, right?
Sure.
Do you think because of your idea of Damien Chazelle, because you know that Damien Chazelle is the director that you know him as, that the shaky cam throws you off in this, but doesn't throw you off in something like 13 Hours because you know Michael Bay directed 13 Hours?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, that's one of my points listed already on my outline, is the fact that Damien Chazelle is known for being very hands-on when it comes to camera work, right?
Yeah.
I mean, La La Land, obviously he has his DPs that he works with, but he's super collaborative with his DPs. He's very, very specific on how he wants the camera to move. So yeah, maybe that did have an effect on me, knowing that I knew this was Damien going crazy. Because this was Damien telling his DP. He's like, no, closer, keep shaking.
Well, because that was exactly for me. Like, it threw me off initially knowing that Damien Chazelle is, we're going to talk about Damien Chazelle in full, but he's definitely a fan of like old school cinema, old school. So his camera movies are usually very fluid, very grandiose, and very like non-shaky. So then the switch in style was very like off-putting to me, but then to me, it kind of came off as very intentional and very much of a thing of it being through the POV of Neil Armstrong, of it being a complete like POV movie. And I think that's where I took most of my enjoyment of it, is that the aspects of the filmmaking all were pointed and directed towards making it a subjective POV experience.
I 100% got that right away. I was like, I get what he's trying to do, but you're making me sick, bro. Yeah. Like the scene where he's like, all right, you're going to go in this loop-de-loop and spin 1,000,000 times. And I'm like, don't tell me he's going to put a camera in there. And he's like, sure enough, he puts a camera in there. And I'm like, ah. I'm like in the movie theater, like going crazy because the thing is spinning and it's making me feel like I'm spinning. Yeah. So I get why he did it. He wanted to make us feel like how these astronauts were feeling during this time. So I understood that. That's just the biggest thing that kind of like affected my experience of the movie. It doesn't mean I didn't like the movie because of that, because that's a stupid reason not to like a movie.
So what do you think outside of the shaky cam? Is that like do you think the shaky cam downgraded your opinion overall, or?
I think it dinked it a little bit of points. I don't think it affected my overall criticism of the movie. I just feel like there was a moment where I was like, if 60-75% of this movie is shaky cam, I can accept it. But it was like 95%. And I was like, that's a little too much, man. I get you, but I was like, here's a few points off. But the rest of the movie, I really feel like the focus is mainly the story, and the third act for me comes to the accomplishments. So me as a nerd watching this movie, because I'm a nerd, not everyone's a nerd, I'm kind of going into the whole like, oh, this is like back in the day in the 60s. The biggest takeaway I took from this was the accomplishment compared to the times, right? The fact that the scene where Ryan Gosling lands his rocket ship in the very first scene, and then right next to it, you see like an ancient freaking 1950s car come up right beside the rocket ship. And you kind of, it clicks in your brain because you see that scene and you're like, oh, it's a guy in a rocket ship. If I'm a kid watching the movie, or I've seen a ton of movies that are in space, right? But as soon as he lands that rocket ship and you see that old-timey 1957 car pull up next to it, immediately you see what Damien Chazelle is trying to do, which is tell you, holy crap, these guys are trying to go to space. And this is the 60s, bro. Like, the technology is not there, but they're still going to do it anyways. And that's kind of the ambitiousness that I saw from these men that are trying to do the most ambitious thing ever, because the technology and the time period that they're in is not enough to do what they want to do, and yet they're doing it anyways. I mean, that's basically the whole premise of the movie, right? Because you see the explosions, you see the mistakes they make, you see how the technology of their time is pulling them back, and yet their brains and their ambitiousness is pulling them forward. And I was like, that's cool. Like, I really like what he was trying to say with that. And obviously the moon landing, and the experience of him actually being on the moon, like when he lands on the moon and he looks out and it has that one crazy shot of the reflection of the moon, and it's basically the moon reflecting the sun. I mean, the
soundstage reflecting the sun.
Exactly. Because all this is fake, RB3.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
It's not, man. Come on. Stop that. But when he sees that, then you start to realize, like, oh, how would I feel if I was on? It's like that POV style of like, whoa, like being on the moon. You question, if I was on, I'd be questioning everything. I'd be like, oh my God, aliens, all this stuff like going in my head. And you like humanity. What is the purpose of life? What is the universe? Like all these questions came into my head in the theater, and I realized that's what Damien Chazelle was trying to do. Was he was trying to like put us on the moon and tell us like how would we feel if we saw this craziness? Like no one's ever done it before. It's just nutty.
Did you see it on IMAX?
No, I didn't. No,
okay.
But that's all so positive for me. The story itself, it works. I'm not going to say it, like you said, blew me away, but it works for me. You know, his, you know, spoilers, but losing his daughter, that's in the first act. So losing his daughter, you know, coming to realization with that, growing up with his kids, trying to be the kind of father he wants to be. Also like being almost addicted to what he was doing and being like,
yeah.
He really wants to accomplish this. He's on a mission. He's like a one-track mind kind of guy.
Yeah. And to cut you off, I mean, cut you off, but like I think that was the biggest problem with the marketing of this movie. I went in thinking it was going to be a movie about going to the moon. It's really a movie about Neil Armstrong. If they would have marketed that in the forefront, I think it would have been a lot better.
Agreed. I feel like people's takeaways from this movie have been mixed, to say the least. I think the audience score is way lower than the Rotten Tomatoes score.
What's the audience
Let me check right now. I just remember hearing that over the weekend, and I've been hearing different takes. For example, my brother loves Damien Chazelle, and he was like, this was just not my type of movie. He felt like it was too slow. He felt like it just dragged too many times. He felt like the story was like just lagging, and a lot of people had that same take. I mean, it wasn't just my brother. So the fact that some people were expecting kind of like this, you know, adventure to the moon type of movie, and what we got instead was a very, very personal story of Neil Armstrong. Just very much like his personal story, his family growing up, all that stuff.
There's some political backlash too, right? That probably also affected the audience score as well.
Which I definitely want to talk about too. 88% of critics liked it, and 61% of audiences liked it.
But so, you don't think? Do you think a lot of that is like Republican bots?
I did. I don't feel like it's Republican bots, but I do feel like, man, that little mini smear campaign, because it wasn't really a smear campaign, but it was this whole like, this movie isn't even pro-America. That's the biggest bullshit.
Yeah, you have to watch this movie.
That's such bullshit. This movie is like, yeah, man, this movie's like the most pro-America movie I've seen in years. Yeah. It's super pro-America. Like, they're literally yelling out, "Go America!" at some points, and they're like, "Down with the Soviets," and "America's gonna win, bitch." Like, that's basically the whole movie is like super pro-America. So I feel like it's really disappointing that whoever said that decided to make that a whole like smear campaign against like, you know, the right wants to like protest this movie because it's anti-American. It's not. It's the opposite. It's very pro-America. So I think that hurt it a little. I don't think that hurt it as much as other people want to think it hurt it. But I think it did hurt it quite a little bit too.
I liken this movie a little bit or a lot to Detroit. The Catherine Bigelow movie, not just in style, because they both have a similar style. Like
they do, with that shaky cam, Detroit.
Yeah, I mean, in film school they call it, you know, documentary realism, right? Like it's supposed to implement the style of documentaries.
Sure.
And I think they both take that style, but I think whereas Detroit does, I think Detroit is a movie about the actual incident in the motel instead of the overall context of Detroit. This movie is not so much about the overall moon landing or the process of the moon landing as it is about the individual of Neil Armstrong. So it's like I take more issue with Detroit because Detroit, it could have been so much more. Whereas this movie, I feel like they got a lot of the historical context around this really well. I remember one of the scenes that was very memorable is, you know, when they're having the montage of the people protesting, and they had that song, the one of the people playing a song that's like the whites want to go to space or whatever, right? Or
what was that called? It was like Whitey in Space.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I can't remember exactly, but that's a real song, and that's real. That's how people really felt during the time, especially in the 1960s.
You imagine if that was happening now, dude?
Yeah,
people would go crazy.
Well, I mean, it's already happened. They're doing a Space Force, right?
Yeah,
something like that, right? But
kind of.
I mean, you know, but
the idea of like spending all these billions and billions of dollars just to go to space when there's people who are starving.
Yeah. Well, we spend, you know, and I think that's what's funny too. I think that I'd much rather have, you know, and this is just me projecting my own personal, that I'd rather have billions of dollars being spent on science and technology and innovation in space than have billions of dollars spent on fighting countries that we have no business fighting, you know? And I like that, the space landing in Vietnam were happening at relatively the same time. Same time. But whereas a lot of people were protesting Vietnam because it was inhumane and, and it was a war, it was a offensive war against people that weren't really attacking us to begin with. That was more of a merit of protest, I feel like, than having the moon. I feel like in the long term, we look back at the moon landing as a point of optimism than as a point of negativity.
Absolutely. It's you have to be a different kind of human if you're working for NASA, right? It's that idea of like advancing humanity. Like this is necessary for humankind. Mm-hmm. Like everyone should be pro this, pro science, pro space exploration, pro trying to discover more and more questions that are unanswered and probably will always be, at least in my lifetime, will continue to be unanswered. But that's kind of the idea of NASA, the idea of space exploration, the idea of landing on the moon. The idea during this time period is to like, let's do something so crazy and in order to like further mankind into expanding our minds, right? Yeah. It's the idea of knowledge, and knowledge is something so important that everyone should be for it. Yeah. So I'm with you. Yeah, I would probably, like you said, be very pro this. I would be like, yeah, let's go to the moon. Let's do the science and let's spend this money to do this kind of stuff.
Especially now, today, I mean, there's no funding for science. There's no, I mean, even during the Obama era, they cut a lot of the NASA funding and a lot of the funding for space. They cut the space program completely, which is very, to me is very unfortunate. And again, I get it. You're trying to save money, but we should be saving money on these wars. I mean, come on, why are we fighting all these wars that we're fighting? But it's just like, to me, that's very disheartening because, we have to think of the long term, right? The future. And ultimately, space innovation fuels advancements in technology that is beyond like comprehension. Through the space program, we have so many advances in aerospace technology and civil technology with designing the launching pads and stuff like that, and the landing stuff. All these innovations come from space and the data that we collect from research on Mars, research on the moon, research from other planets, and all the space probes that we send up. Like that's the most valuable information, if you ask me, especially when especially when this planet is not in such a good spot when it comes to climate change. We really do have to start considering the future, right? We're like, where is the planet heading? Do we have to recolonize on a different planet? Do we have to, those are questions that we have to answer. But to me, that should be a priority over a lot of the things that we spend money on in our government.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is something that's important and something that's going on now. And this is such not ironic, but almost kind of ironic situation that we're talking about this movie in this time, because there is kind of like a mini war on science that's going on with our government. A lot of people who are very anti-science for some reason.
Yeah, are in the administration.
In the administration. And I find that so bizarre. So bizarre. I mean, just the fact that, I don't know, man. I would never understand why people consider that to be some sort of anti-God thing. Where, as I said before a million times, like I'm very pro-science and I'm very pro-God. Yeah. So it's not like, like this weird administrative, political campaign that's being developed to kind of sort of manipulate the evangelical right into believing that science is which is like the opposite of what it's like science should be even more explored because of your faith.
Yeah. Well, that's, and that is why it's the same trick that a lot of the right pulls with, same trick they pull of racism and poverty. What racism is just a disguise for, or what being a racist is a disguise for poverty, right? Like the idea of racism is to disguise poor white people from thinking that they are, the idea of racism is to make poor white people think they're better than poor black people, and they're in the same boat. It's the same elites that are going to keep putting you down. It's the same way with science. They put this whole idea of religion against it only because anti-science is also anti-science is pro-corporation. right? Like corporations bank on scientific innovation not happening because they want to keep the oil pushing. They want to keep the the toxic chemicals that they're wasting across the world. They want to keep climate change going, and they don't want regulations for corporations because once scientific research gets involved and ousts them for the bad that they're doing to the planet, it's no good. So that's why Scott Pruitt, who is the I think he still is the head of the EPA, but I think he might have been outed by now. But
I think he is.
He is outed. Yeah, but
no, I think he's still there.
Oh, he's still there. Yeah, but he before Trump appointed him, he was famous for suing the EPA a bunch of times, representing the big oil companies. Now he's running the EPA. The guy who used to who tried to sue the Environmental Protection Agency is now running the Environmental Protection Agency, and now they're cutting all these resources for research for science because of that. And now we're talking about NASA versus environmental stuff, but I think it all kind of plays into the same like lack of importance that our government seems to have for science.
Yeah, I've been kind of reading up on it and seeing different reports on space exploration, science, and all that stuff. And it's climate change is probably the biggest one that people keep bringing up in reports that are very recent. But one thing that is interesting that I see now is the idea of before the whole Trump Space Force thing, there was a little report that I saw. It's like a 15-minute documentary report talking about space exploration and satellite technology and how countries like mainly Russia and China are the two main countries that have satellites in space and that have different forms of satellite interaction. And the idea of space warfare. They were talking about this before Trump. Space warfare. I saw this I don't know how many years ago. And the idea that the Air Force is kind of not also in charge of the Air Force, but also in charge of the satellites in space and defending the satellites in space. Because if China is tired of our bullshit, or if Russia wants to really mess with us, they can just be like, boop, and just pop the satellite in space and leave us screwed for a long time. So the idea of technology, NASA-level technology being used for bad is also an interesting thing that I thought that report was bringing up, which is why this whole Space Force thing is already existed. It's called the United States Air Force. And their whole point is defense against those countries that have that kind of technology, because that kind of technology could be dangerous. I personally want to see more people of science, more men of science influence political atmosphere and influence
women of science too.
What's that?
Women of science.
Women of science to influence these men in power, because I think this is very, very important. And I feel like this film is an example of accomplishments that can be done using politics and science, right? Because that's what this is all about. It's political and it's science. And I don't know. I just feel like these are the types of things that humanity should be, supportive of and supportive of science, because that's what NASA is supposed to accomplish, right?
Yeah, science exploration. My question now, Ace. Now this is a NASA movie. Hidden Figures is a NASA movie. Hidden Figures against First Man. Where do you land?
Honestly, Hidden Figures, man.
Hidden Figures?
Yeah, I think it's more entertaining. I don't know, man. This movie had some moments where I was like, all right, let's go, let's keep going. And I can't lie, I was kind of feeling that, let's land on the damn moon, bro.
Oh, okay. So you thought I should have had a little bit more.
I don't know, man. Hidden Figures was fun. I had fun with it.
It's a great movie.
Even though it's about mathematical equations and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It was still fun. I wanted to ask you a counter question to that.
Yeah.
Is how they didn't really mention the women who kind of helped do this whole operation.
Yeah, I mean,
were you disappointed with that? Because I was like, I thought they would give a cool little shout out.
Yeah, I thought they were gonna at least feature to some extent, but again, that was mostly male dominant. I don't know to what level those women at NASA had directly impacted Neil Armstrong. But again, I think it would have been easy to put some female characters in there. But I think I do apply to forgiving his wife Claire Foy a lot more to do, and a traditional biopic would normally have her. So
wait, say it again.
Should give her more to do than I think a traditional biopic would
right
have her. Yeah.
Holy crap, man! I was like, that's the Claire Foy, bro. That's the queen, man.
Yeah.
And you're making her like just kind of look sad.
Oh, you don't think she had enough?
I don't think she had anything to do. I thought that's what you said.
No, I think she had. I thought she had it.
Oh,
I thought she had
not me, man. She had like one scene where she was like, "Go tell the kids that you're leaving," and I was like, "That's kind of it. That's kind of her one scene."
I thought she had some good scenes.
Nah, man, I was disappointed. I was like, bro, you can't have Claire Foy just be standing there. You got to have her do some shit.
Is she British?
Yeah, she's British.
I do think her accent was not good.
It slipped out once. It slipped out once.
I hope it slipped out once. I thought it slipped out multiple times. I was
there
like,
was
damn.
one scene that scene actually is where she opens the door.
That's what I noticed
and she
most.
goes, "You're leaving the children.
Yeah.
You're leaving the children. I mean children."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh damn, Claire." Yeah. She just came offset on that.
On the queen.
But for me, I felt like she had nothing to do. I don't know. She had one scene, and I was disappointed. And that's the one thing that my mom asked me because she's a fan of The Crown, obviously.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Mom, she was barely in it."
Barely?
Yeah,
in it?
she barely did anything.
I thought the scene when, well, I don't know. I thought, and again, I look at sometimes like, when I like a lot of cross-cutting scenes because that tells me a lot about personal stakes versus like big stakes. And I thought the scene where I can't remember exactly what was happening with Neil Armstrong, but it was cutting back to him, to Ryan Gosling, but it was cutting back to when she was first moving into the neighborhood and first meeting like the neighbors, and how her big like moment of first arriving to this mission is like becoming assimilating to the neighborhood. So I thought it gave her a little bit of a story from that point, and it kind of built off that as it kind of showed her relationship with some of the other families a little bit.
Sure.
I mean,
yeah, I felt like she was just looking.
You wanted a co-lead.
Yeah.
You were like, you're looking for.
I wanted Claire Foy to do some shit, like straight up, like backhand some people. But another thing too, real quickly before we move on, Buzz. Holy crap, Buzz, man.
Yeah, I didn't know he was an asshole.
I was gonna say the whole time I was watching this movie, I was like, whoa, is Buzz like, was he a dick to Damien Chazelle? Was like Damien just like, he met Buzz one time and Buzz was like, fuck you, man. And then Damien was like, man, I'm gonna make you a dick in my movie, bro. You're gonna be an asshole.
Yeah, that was a little crazy.
And I was like, yo, that's kind of messed up. I don't know. I don't know Buzz, but was he really that kind of a dick? He could have been.
I don't know. I don't know enough about those guys.
I just felt like it really stood out in a movie full of like stoic white guys. They were just stoic dudes. They didn't say much. They're like, yeah, sure, yes, okay, we got to do it, and that was all they would say. And then Buzz comes out like, "What up, motherfuckers? Your friend died? Boo hoo, bitch! I'm going to space, bro." He's like thugging shit. He's got a chain. He's like, "Yo, I'm gonna ride that rocket ship like a boss, bro." And I'm like, "Yo, what's up with Buzz?"
Yeah, Buzz Aldrin, man. I know what happened, but yeah.
Tim Allen's gonna play me in a future movie, motherfucker.
Did Tim Allen play Buzz Aldrin?
No, Buzz Lightyear. Toy Story.
Ah, man, that's fucked up. That's fucked up.
And I was like, yo, he stands out. Like, he stands out in a movie full of a bunch of, like, regular stoic dudes.
He said Tim Allen, bro. Weak.
That's true, man. It's true. I don't know. I just really felt like it stood out. I was like, this stands out, man. Like, he is a dick. Why is he such a dick?
I don't know, man.
That's kind of. I feel like that's kind of messed up to do to a guy who's like a real life dude. He's like probably watching this movie.
Hey, if that's really him,
then I support that decision. If he was really a dick, then I support it. So,
but maybe he was just a dick to Neil Armstrong, and maybe that's why that was written that way.
Yeah, I know this is based on a book.
Is it?
Yeah, it's based on a. I think his name is Jim something, but he was one of the guys who worked on it. Damien mentioned that in an interview. He said, "Oh yeah, in the book, this is all the retelling of one of the guys who was working on this program."
Oh, interesting. Well, I know this is also the first time that Damien Chazelle has not had a writing credit on his movie.
That's interesting.
This is written by. I mean, the credit is Josh Singer. Just a solo writing, but in this town, like you could rewrite a whole screenplay and not get credit for it. But at least according to the credits, it was written by Josh Singer. So it's interesting how The writing is a lot different in this movie as compared to, I think, a lot of Damien Chazelle movies, which
For sure.
are usually a little louder, a little more dialogue, centric.
Dialogue heavy.
Dialogue heavy.
This is very dialogue light.
Yeah.
There's almost moments where it's like no dialogue for a while.
Yeah, I love it. I love moments. I mean, I love it when it does that. I think that is very bold. A lot of the choices it makes with sound and with style is bold. I love when they cut back to like the 8mm footage. It reminded me a lot of Raging Bull, when it had those 8mm moments. And I love the use of flashbacks. I don't know. I liked a lot. For me, I almost was like so sold on the Neil Armstrong story that I didn't really. By the time he got to the moon, I was like, all right, this is kind of boring. Like,
really?
Let's move on. Like, to me at least, that was me. But I mean, I thought it was really cool. They sold the whole thing of like, oh, we filmed it on IMAX cameras and then they're only on the moon for like 5 minutes. I paid again, luckily I had AMC stubs, so, or I had my Flick tickets. Go get yourself a Flick ticket. But yeah, I had my AMC stubs, so I didn't have to pay for the IMAX. But I can't imagine paying for IMAX and only seeing 5 minutes of a fake moon landing on screen.
Yeah. The rest of it, you're seeing Claire Foy's face like this close to her face, just all the way up in her.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, it's IMAX for Claire Foy's eyes.
Yeah, man.
Hey, I'd pay IMAX for Claire Foy's eyes.
Yeah, no, that's a great price point. If you want a better moon sequence, go to 2001: Space Odyssey. I feel like is the best moon sequence
Shots
to
fired.
me. I'm just kidding. Yeah. I'm sure it's very inspired by that too. But
there's a lot of space movies, man.
Yeah,
I feel like it's hard to like be comparing it to other ones because it's like they're all great for their own thing. Yeah, that's just my take.
Yeah, the First Man was dope.
First Man, I thought it was okay. I liked it. I thought the better thing for me was just kind of the informative stuff. That was just my opinion because I like learning stuff and I like kind of documentary style movies. I love that stuff and I love these kind of biopics that do it that way. So I appreciated that the most. As far as the story, I was like, it works, but it's not, like you said before, blowing me away.
Yeah.
But, yep, that's our review for First Man. Hopefully you guys can give us your opinions on First Man. What do you guys think? Are you part of the people who went to see this movie? The few amount of people that went to see it, in my opinion.
No, I don't know if it's few, but we're not putting spoiler in the title, too. We didn't spoil anything, right?
No, but this is my thing. I was thinking about it as I was driving here. What am I going to spoil? That he made it on the moon? That he made it back on Earth?
I feel like, that should be a rule. If it's a real history event, like, we don't have to put spoiler in the title.
Especially, I was rethinking the film, and I was like, there's nothing to spoil. There's really nothing to spoil.
Yeah.
So hopefully you guys listen all the way through, even if you didn't see the film. You can still enjoy our conversation on Damien Chazelle. Yeah. And we're going to get back into it with Damien Chazelle's first film, and that is a black and white musical called Guy and Madeline on a Park Bench.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if you knew about this one, RB3, but this is a film that is very, very, very indie.
Yeah, or even made at Harvard.
Yeah, and it's a film that is kind of hard to find, a little bit hard to find. I unfortunately wasn't able to catch the whole thing. I saw a little bit of it. I think it's on Amazon, but I might be mistaken.
I think. Well, I had caught some of it when he was doing the La La Land like press tours and stuff, and when I went back then, it was on YouTube.
I've seen some numbers of it on YouTube.
Yeah.
That's mainly kind of what I've based it on.
Yeah.
Some of the songs and numbers that he created.
But it's very much like pre La La Land, like that kind of voyeuristic.
And what I should have done before is kind of get a little bit into Damien Chazelle. Obviously, he's one of the youngest working directors right now that is killing it. I believe he's like 31, 30 something. But either way, he's been killing the game. He's a nerd, like he's a true film buff nerd.
Oh, yeah.
If you see any interview with Damien Chazelle, you can tell like, yo, this guy he's very much the kind of guy who's like bored and he's watching like a French film, like a black and white French film because he's bored on a Saturday night. This is that kind of film buff, stereotypical kind of guy, and He's the kind of guy who turns on like TCM for fun, like Turner Classic Movies, and is just catching whatever.
Hey, everybody should, man. You should. Turn TCM.
Shout out to Alicia Malone, who's the host for TCM.
Yeah. Get Filmstruck too. That's a great service.
Yeah, he's the kind of guy who would be on Filmstruck on a weekend.
I'm on Filmstruck on the weekends. People need the login information. Let me know, man. I'm just kidding.
I'm on that Netflix on the weekend.
Netflix. Netflix don't got enough old movies for me, man.
That's true. Yeah. But either way, this is that kind of guy. He's the kind of guy who's very much inspired by one of his favorite movies is The Umbrellas of Cherbourg.
Yeah.
Which is a French,
very film schooly movie.
Yeah, I believe it's a French movie, right? It's a French musical,
1963, if I'm not mistaken. French movie that is
64. Yeah,
64. That's very much. If you are any film school, you're gonna watch that movie.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of his major inspirations for La La Land. But either way, besides that, this is the kind of guy who enjoys the French New Wave. He's the kind of guy who enjoys classic musicals. He's the kind of guy who enjoys all types of musicals, which is why he wanted to make his first musical, which is this movie, a black and white, very traditional indie type modern musical, because it is taking place in modern times with modern characters and modern settings. So yeah, as far as what you've seen from this movie, what do you take from it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it plays into the Damien Chazelle tradition of, do you like jazz? Hey, I don't know if you've seen the boot. I'm going to say that out loud during this
I was going to say.
That's from the B movie. Have you seen the B movie?
Oh.
With the homie Jerry Seinfeld?
Yeah,
when he plays,
the homie Jerry Seinfeld. That's from now on what you have to call him.
Hey,
That's not Jerry Seinfeld. You have to add the quote, the homie Jerry Seinfeld.
The homie Jerry. Hey, after the B movie, man, he's always going to be the homie.
You like jazz?
But,
no, my thing from jazz is, I was going to say jazz. I think of Jazz from Transformers. What's cracking, little bitches?
What's cracking, little bitches? My first lieutenant. Designation Jazz.
Now you got split in half, man. R.I.P. Jazz, bro.
R.I.P. Jazz, man. Yeah. I mean, that's how Buzz was coming out in First Man. He just came up and said, "What's cracking, little bitches?" rolling up in the hood.
Yeah.
With his 1963 like Chevelle or something.
Yeah. As soon as they cast Paul Scheer as like any part, you know he's gonna be like the jackass of the movie.
Yeah. Is that his name?
I think Paul Scheer. Yeah,
no, it's not Paul Scheer. It's the guy from friggin' Ant-Man, isn't it? Yeah.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it is.
Is it?
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna get his name right now. Corey Stoll.
That's Corey Stoll?
Yeah.
That was the guy who played Buzz Aldridge? Are you sure?
Corey Stoll, yeah. It's right here on the IMDb.
Oh, man, I tripped in.
Yeah, he's an Ant-Man. He's in House of Cards.
I thought it was Paul Scheer from fucking... From, you know what I mean? From Disaster Artist and all that shit. Yeah,
but you're way off.
Yeah. I thought it was really...
This is Corey Stoll, man.
They gave him the Paul Scheer haircut, though, right?
He's always had that hair, man.
Corey Stoll?
Yeah.
Nah, man, he had a little hair, man. Corey Stoll, he's always bald. He had the Paul Scheer haircut, that's why.
Either way, that's how Buzz be rolling up in this First Man movies.
Yeah.
What's cracking, little bitches?
Yeah.
But either way, I like jazz from Transformers, and Damien Chazelle likes real life jazz.
Yeah. And I like jazz from the B movie. Jazz?
There you go. Yeah, he's not shy about his love of music, his love of jazz. He was a drummer.
Yeah, and then
in a jazz band.
And his roommate at the time, his best friend at Harvard is Justin
Horowitz.
Justin Horowitz.
Yeah, who's the composer of La La Land
and
Whiplash, and he's also a musician himself who plays jazz music.
Did he do First Man as well?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Whoever did First Man, score for that movie, 10 out of 10.
Yeah, I think it might be Hans Zimmer.
Is it really? Yeah.
I'll look it up right now. But either way, his love of music inspired both of his biggest movies, if not, all three of his movies before First Man. I mean, think about his movies. It's a musical, a black and white indie musical. It's Whiplash. And it's La La Land, all music centered. Mm-hmm. So that very much goes to show what First Man. Yeah, it's Justin Horowitz.
Oh, he did First Man. Yeah, great score,
Man.
Incredible score.
It is a great score. I absolutely agree with that. But it's very much like I grew up around drummers. Back in my old church, I used to have some drummers, and my drummers, one of my drummer buddies, who's like crazy, was a jazz drummer, and he would tell me and he would show me like jazz drummers, bro, are the hardest. Like they go ham, and obviously we'll see that in Whiplash, but they go ham. Like it's crazy how like jazz is such a technical style of music where it's just so completely technical that's part of the art is the technicality of it. And yeah, I mean throughout the whole time, Guy and Madeline in the Park, the whole time it's like a jazz type score. So we have that kind of vibe that goes into it, and you can tell that's what Damien Chazelle caters to because he's such a big fan of it. So it's a big giant love letter to that. And obviously the love letter gets bigger when we get to La La Land. But yeah, that's kind of my big takeaway from it. And the fact that it's very much like, when I say indie, it's indie, bro. Like it doesn't, you can tell like it's black and white because they're trying to save money. And the shots are very close and personal because it's an indie film. So I kind of like the fact that it's a modern indie film where you can tell like this budget was like nothing, and yet they still made a pretty successful movie considering, you know, that it did, you know, pretty well as far as getting his name on the map. So I don't know if that's another takeaway that you have from it, or if, you know, that's kind of your final takeaway like it is mine. Yeah.
So. No, I mean, I agree. I'm glad that, and of course after this, he became known as like kind of a ghostwriter for a lot of Hollywood movies. So yeah, whatever this movie did to grab that voice, obviously caught the attention of a lot of people.
And he made Whiplash into a short. I know that, and he used that to try and sell it to different studios and production companies and different producers.
And it was a short film that he made also starred J.K. Simmons, and it was the scene. It was just one scene. It was the scene where J.K. Simmons throws the thing at the character's head. It wasn't played by Miles Teller at the time.
Yeah.
But the scene was so good, it won the Sundance Film Festival for like best short or something like that, or one of the drama categories for the short films. So yeah, he used that to convince some investors, and of course the awards acclaim behind it from Sundance too, to make Whiplash.
Yeah, and it's one of those things too where he was working on La La Land even before that.
Yeah,
like he was working on La La Land while he was, you know, shopping around Whiplash.
La La Land's always been his passion project.
Yeah, essentially, Guy and Madeline on the park bench was essentially his, you know, trying to make a La La Land, and then when he was thinking of a more ambitious scale, that was La La Land. He got rejected quite a few times from La La Land until he made Whiplash into a feature film, because that, you know, got him the opportunity to make Whiplash.
Right.
Now, what is your connection to this movie, Whiplash?
Whiplash was a movie that, you know, everybody hyped up, obviously, when it first came out. I didn't see it in theaters because it was 2014, still in Compton, no movie theaters in Compton. So I really didn't see it until that was, and it is full transparency here. I don't know if there's like any like federal agents like listening, but like this was right when like there was like when they had like all the Oscar like screeners that like leaked online or whatever, like, and I had to copy a copy of the Whiplash.
You know what's funny?
Yeah.
I did the same thing. Damn. I saw it like that too.
Yeah,
I saw it on my laptop.
Yeah. I mean, that was the only way I could really see it, man. That was the only way I could really see it. I'm sorry, Damien Chazelle. Yeah. I did buy it.
I wasn't gonna admit that, but since I was not gonna admit that, but now since you did, I'm like, all right, I might as well jump in the pool too. I'll take off my shirt and jump in the pool.
Hey man, I bought it on iTunes. I did buy it on iTunes. They had it on when La La Land came out. They had Whiplash on iTunes for $4.99. I picked it up there, so I did not pay for it. But
and I told my parents about it. It made them buy it.
yeah. So hey,
and I made them watch it because I'm like, you got to see this movie. Yeah. That was my reaction after seeing it, man.
Yeah,
was like telling because you're right, it was pretty hyped up, and I was like, oh, right away, I got to see it, and I found it.
Yeah,
and then I saw it, and I was like, yo,
that show was lit.
It was lit, dude. Especially, just the storytelling, man. The fact that he can make like a true character study type movie based around the life of a jazz drummer, based around the life of a jazz drummer's student who is obsessed with becoming the best drummer there is. That just plain and simple. There's nothing more to it other than he wants to be the best. And it's crazy because it's the idea of this like masculine nature to be the king of your domain, right? That's how
your territory.
Yeah, that's what I took from it. At least for me, it's the idea of like I'm gonna be the king of this zone, this bubble, whatever it is, and he does that by practicing, by becoming the best, by competing, by being an asshole to other people who might not feel the same way. And you get that all basically in that dinner scene in this movie when he's talking to, I think it's his brothers or his cousins, I forget.
I think it's I don't know.
His brothers or his cousins.
Or it's like family friends or something like that. Something, I can't remember. I know what you're talking about.
And he basically kind of scoffs at them by saying like, oh, you guys are doing bullshit shit. Yeah. I'm doing top level stuff. I'm doing stuff that's going to make me a name, make me famous, make me a king.
Right.
He wants the crown.
Right.
And right in that scene, you get it. It clicks in your head that, oh, this is this kind of guy. It's the kind of guy who wants to be the best. And that's so fascinating to me because that's, I don't know. To me, that's like an interesting character study to see the mind inside of this young guy who is like listening to the greats to be the great, right?
Yeah,
He's got to beat the greats. He's Ric Flairing it, man.
Ric Flair, what? Drew? Yeah, Amigos. Obviously, Ric Flair drip.
And on the other side of it, to finish up my thought, is the idea of a J.K. Simmons character who is essentially a monster, because that's what he is. He's a monster. And he's him when he was younger, and he's taken all that anger and all that rage and all that obsession to become this world-renowned, jazz orchestrator, musician, composer. Like he's just a master type of guy, and he uses that power and that clout and that fame to kind of judge other people in a very he's subverting their successes. He's making people think who they're top shit, making them feel like little shit. And that's the way that J.K. Simmons walks around in this movie, is just this complete power over everyone else, because he's like, I'm better than you. I'm better than you at this. I'm better than you at that. And it's like, that's how he walks around, because he feels like superior to other people that are around him. Which is incredibly fascinating and incredibly frustrating, because RB3, I already cussed before, but I'm going to cuss a lot on this podcast because my entire time watching this movie, bro, I'm Miles Teller. So I'm like, man, fuck you, bro. That's my reaction to J.K. Simmons' character.
Yeah.
Because the entire time I'm like, you're a dick, bro. You're an asshole. So if I were in my shoes, and every time Miles Teller wants to say that, I say it as I'm watching the movie. I'm like, man, fuck you, man. Because he's a dick in this movie. Yeah, J.K. Simmons, man. Yeah. But it's that too, like, going back and forth. This competitive nature between the young up and coming trainee versus the older veteran master. You know what I'm saying? And that's why this movie is so good, so freaking good.
Yeah, no, I absolutely adore this movie. From the second I watched it, I mean, this is, you talk about a character study. I mean, this is kind of the definition of a character study, right? And it's all centrally focused on the POV through the Miles Teller character. I can't remember his exact name. And that, I mean, and that in and of itself, I mean, you even see, throughout this entire movie, there's not a scene in this movie that Andrew's not in, because you're completely behind him the entire time.
I was going to say, you remembered his name.
Yeah.
Andrew.
Yeah. That's what, okay, cool. Damn, I think it just came up because I definitely think that what this movie does great at is establishing the ruthlessness of J.K. Simmons, how much he yells at. I mean, I just know Andrew because all I hear in my head is Andrew. Like anytime I watch this movie, because J.K. Simmons does not hold back, and it's it's the whole deconstruction of the master versus the apprentice relationship, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times in real life, it is that abusive. It is that we have somebody who's that high of a power, who's somebody who aspires to be like that. That's how people are willing to take that abuse to get to the top.
Dude, think about college football. I mean, think about college sports in general. I mean, the abuse of power. We see that so many times. There's even reports and stuff. The NCAA is investigating stuff of like how abusive college coaches, college scouts.
Because the whole idea is demasculating. Am I saying that correctly? I don't know. But like taking that alpha mentality away from somebody.
Yeah.
And putting them in complete control. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Making them, breaking them, and making them put themselves back together.
And not just that, but creating a system around it where it's just this giant circle and this giant bubble. Where everything is just so naturally brushed under the rug, right? It's like, oh, that's not true. That doesn't happen in real life. Otherwise, there would be reports on it. You think these guys are going to report these? No way. If a professor is throwing shit across the room and throwing stuff and yelling at you and screaming at you, you're going to keep that shit quiet. Yeah. You're not going to be like, well, he yelled at me. No, you're going to keep it quiet. You're going to keep it to yourself, and you're going to try to impress him the next day. Like, that's the same thing with college coaches who are abusive or anything like that. The system created around them is a system where there's never going to be a report.
Yeah, because
people don't report that.
Because we create these authority figures who we hold up to such high regard.
They're gods.
Yeah.
It's like you can't do that. So that's kind of the narrative around this movie too, because it's the idea of like him reporting the abuse of this teacher, which again doesn't really happen as much, in our world that we live in. And the idea of him reporting it, and the idea of now this crazy monster is literally chasing you. Like Michael Myers in a freaking Halloween movie, because he knows you reported on him. So now you're like, oh shit, he knows, and he's going to kill me, and he's going to kill my career before I even start. Yeah. Like, that's a horror movie, man. Like, that's the level of Whiplash hits. It hits like horror movie levels for me, because that's what I imagine.
Yeah. And it's realistic.
And I imagine being like 20 years old and being like, oh crap, I just kicked a dragon. Yeah. And now the dragon's literally going to burn me. Yeah. And I'm done. Like, that's so scary.
You never step on their own toes in this town. And, thankfully, we, at USC Film School, we had an incident recently with a professor who flipped out. Fortunately, that got reported, got all taken care of. I don't think the guy no longer works there. But yeah, that's an example of shit that can happen at a university level.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a lot of abuse that goes unreported and that people don't talk about. I mean, obviously, I don't want to mention the huge one that is, the Michigan State nature, but that's what happened. Michigan State is one that's huge, right, with the gymnastics team. There's the Penn State stuff that happened as well. Like the Ohio State stuff that came out like a month ago. Yeah. Literally a month ago, the Ohio State stuff that came out. Yeah. Everything is brushed under the rug. And that's why freaking Florida State with Jameis Winston too is a perfect example too. That I personally followed that story for a very long time when it happened like 4 years ago. I think it was 4 years ago when Jameis was at Florida State, and I was blown away by the reaction. I was blown away. The fact that everyone was like, nah, whatever. And I'm like, bro, this guy like legit raped a girl, and we're like brushing it under the rug.
Especially when it comes to athletes, especially with the sexual assault stuff, it's like.
Yeah, but it goes all the way to the top. Yeah, it always does. Yeah, and that's what people always forget. They're like, this coach tells that coach, this coach tells the head coach, then the athletic director, and then the athletic director goes whoop, and it's one big circle, and it happens again. Yeah, it's all brushed under the rug.
Especially with the athletes themselves. I mean, their bodies are, their temples. They rely on their bodies, so having that violated by person in power is very damaging. And for Whiplash, for the physical torment that Andrew himself endures to try and impress J.K. Simmons,
the car scene too, man.
The car accident. Well, I always think, to me, the most painful image is when he's like drumming and like his hands start bleeding, like, oh shit, like, and that's a real thing for a lot of jazz drummers too, right? Is how their hands really feel after that. But yeah, I mean, like being in a car accident, trying to rush to get what you got to go, that's also equally scary. I mean, that's just consequence of trying
it's
too
nuts,
hard.
Man. Now let's finish up by calling out that ending, because the ending is where the movie kind of reaches its full potential, I guess is what I can say, because I can't lie, man, that scene is so epic. It's epic because it's the nature of being defeated by someone who's better than you. You've been bested by the master, right? And it's his idea of him retreating back to the arms of his father. And then right away, I love that scene because when my first time watching it on my laptop, I was very much like, as soon as he's like, he kind of like steps away from his father, takes off his jacket, and he's like, man, fuck this, I'm gonna fuck you up, bro. And I'm like, let's go. And then he starts, and I'm like, oh shit. And I'm literally like watching this movie, standing up on my desk. I mean, like above from my desk, because I was sitting down and I had to stand up because I was like, oh, he's about to go off. Like, he's about to throw some hands. And that's his version of throwing hands. Like, that's him being defiant. That's him being like, oh, you want to challenge me? Let's go. And he challenges him like one-on-one. Right. And it's that nature of like, they're supporting each other, but they're also fighting each other. Yeah. They're trying to kill each other by making the best music. And I was like, yo, this is deep on so many different levels. I loved it. I love the ending. I think it's great.
Yeah, no, definitely one of the best endings in recent memory, and I think it just goes to show what the kind of skill that Damien Chazelle has as a director, as a musical director, especially.
Yeah, let's move on to one of my favorite movies of the past decade, a movie that I've been very unashamed of preaching, of screaming, of literally giving Scott Mantz a million hugs about, and that is La La Land. La La Land is a movie that I adore. La La Land is a movie that really impacted me, and I absolutely love this movie. It was one of my favorite movies of the year. I think I put it number 2 or 3 that year. I think number 2, but I forget which one I put number 1 anyways. Either way, La La Land is what made Damien Chazelle the name we know now. Because this is what got what was it, like 13 Oscar nominations, 11 Oscar nominations?
So, yeah, 13.
Was it either 11 or 13?
It was 14 maybe. I don't know.
Either way, this movie got all these Oscar nominations. This movie got all the hype coming off. I think it was premiered at TIFF, but I might be wrong.
I think so. I know somebody. I remember they sent out a screening for La La Land a year before it came out, and I had the pass. I had it all signed up and ready to go. I just didn't make it.
Dang, man, that sucks.
Yeah.
But I remember the hype coming from this movie, coming from people we know, like Scott Mantz, and like other people that
Scott
were.
Mantz, definitely.
Alicia Malone was another one who was kind of hyping it up, and I was like, oh damn, I'm ready for this. And it's great, man. It's great all around because the camera work is awesome. The musical numbers are awesome. The color in this movie is baller. It's gangster. It's very in your face, and I love it. And the music in this movie is the one thing that people really didn't care for. A lot of people, at least I talked to, and at least a lot of people that I went to see the movie with, who would counter me and would be like, "Bro, that music was trash," and I was like, what movie did you see, man? I love that soundtrack. That soundtrack is like, I rock that stuff, man. I memorize those songs, and I love those songs.
Yeah.
But all around, I really did feel like this movie was baller. I don't know what your take on it. I forget how much, if you loved it as much as I did or if you didn't.
Yeah, no, I did. I still love it. Yeah, I still love it. I mean, I wrote a fucking whole article on Schmoes' website about how much I loved it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I still.
Did you give Scott Mantz high fives about it?
Yeah. He gave me one of the mini Oscars, one of the best friend Oscars. We're all La La Landers for life. But
I was a La La Lander with him too, man.
Hey, man, that's why I'm repping the LA today. LA hat. You know what I mean?
Hey.
LA also for Dodgers, of course, playing today.
But I gotta say to you, man, I'm gonna start out with a hot take. What's that? I don't even know if I should say it, but I'm gonna say it anyways. I think it deserved the Oscar, man.
For Best Picture?
I was rooting for it to just,
Okay.
I think it deserved the Oscar.
I think
we both saw Moonlight together, by the way.
We did, and we've had this debate.
I know, but it still bums me out, bro, because I'm like, wait a minute. I liked it more than you did.
Well, yeah, I mean, you liked
it. And now
it.
I didn't love it. I was like, oh, it was pretty good. And you were like, nah, man. And I was like, what? That was your reaction to Moonlight.
I didn't say nah, man.
Yeah, you did.
I had different
You were like, Mahershala Ali was dope, and that was it.
No,
I was like,
I didn't say that.
Shit.
Nah, you said that.
I did say that.
Yeah, you said that. Jesus.
I said Mahershala Ali was the best part of the movie, and he was in it for like 2 minutes.
Yeah. My expectations were different for Moonlight than when I saw it, but
every time I think of Moonlight now, I think of XS Tentacion. Moonlight, call me the phone with the Moonlight.
Hey, R.I.P. He was on Lil Wayne's album too, man.
I love XX, man, and it's crazy how I got into him right when he got killed. Yeah, it's crazy, man.
Hey, man.
It's nutty. Like it really is gnarly.
It's very controversial too.
Yeah, very controversial.
Yeah.
Either way. La La Land.
Moonlight. Okay, so again, I'll still contend I like La La Land more. Like I will watch La La Land any time of the day more than I will watch Moonlight any time of the day. I still think Moonlight's the better movie though. Objectively speaking, you know, like
I don't agree.
From an editing, just from an editing standpoint, don't you think that the scene where the second character, was he Chiron at that point?
I think so.
I think it was Chiron at that point. When he right before he gets ready to hit the dude with the chair, he's like walking through the school and he's like busting through the doors, like, you know, the different rooms and through the doors. You don't think just that editing in that scene alone was better than a lot of the editing we saw in La La Land? Or maybe not better, but at least, I don't know, you know? And
it was good. I'm not going to say it wasn't good.
I don't know. I think the editing, I think the cinematography for what they were doing for the story in Moonlight was a lot more impactful for the story. The style of La La Land is a lot more stylized, of course. Like, the style is bigger, it's grander, it's supposed to, you know, La La Land is essentially a modern-day remake of Singing in the Rain, you know? But I think Moonlight, for the elements of storytelling that it was trying to go for, the narrative devices that it was trying to implicate, I think just overall, I just think it was a better movie.
I don't know, man.
Yeah,
I don't agree.
No, I mean, for best picture, I'm definitely glad Moonlight won more than La La Land. Sure. Just on the fact that, you know, I don't really love the idea of keep handing Hollywood movies, you know, best picture, whatever, you know?
Sure. That's a good point. It was very much like a Hollywood, I don't want to say, well, I was going to say it anyways, Hollywood jerk off, but yeah, that's kind of what it was.
But see, even when La La Land came out, I still contend to this day, it's not the same kind of traditional Hollywood movie that the Oscars are usually handing out Oscars to. Is very much a new age type. It's by a young person for young people. But that's what La La Land is.
Here's what I'll say, just because we can go on and on and on, and we will, about how much we love this movie, La La Land. But I kind of want to talk about this whole Oscar thing and the Oscar run too, because during the end of the year, December of 2016, it got kind of like a weird smear campaign going on.
Yeah,
La La Land did. And
backlash.
Backlash. Yeah. And I was very much like kind of taken aback from it because, again, I'm coming from a point of view of a fan. And I'm like, yo, everyone's hype on this movie. La La Land's the shit. What's up? And I went home for Christmas and to show this movie to my parents, to go watch it with them. And I went and watched it with my parents. They loved it. And then the following year, I went and saw it again with my brother because he hadn't seen it. And I was like hype on it. And that's when the smear campaign was starting to happen during like late December, early January, talking about like, yo, La La Land is whack, bro. And I was like, what? What's going on? Like, what's this smear campaign? Like, it was like La La Land is whack, the music is trash, and it's white as fuck.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the smear campaign in general, those 3 points.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, dang, there's a smear campaign going on. But it was kind of that whole nature of like, man, this is just some, you know, crazy white people dancing in the street. It ain't even that cool.
Yeah, I mean...
And I was like, oh, that's not what I got from it. Yeah. That's just me. I didn't feel the smear campaign was worth it, was credited.
The backlash, I mean...
I didn't feel like it was a necessary backlash because I was like, maybe, but I still think it was dope. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, backlash-wise, I mean, yeah, the biggest backlash was the race thing, right?
It was.
Especially when the optics are Moonlight, all black cast, you know, black director, black writer, black editor,
and there's
black
white couple who's trying to save jazz from the black people.
Yeah. And
these black people are trying to make jazz into mainstream music.
Yeah. I mean, that's
but the white man's gonna come in and be like, "Yo, jazz is not supposed to be mainstream, bro."
Yeah. Especially when John Legend
is like, "Yo, John, hold up, John. I know you're trying to tell me what jazz is, but I'm Ryan Gosling, bro." That's why I loved his SNL monologue that I've told you a million times about.
Ryan Gosling's one.
Because he's so self-aware about it. Yeah. He was like, hey, man, I just got to tell you guys, I saved jazz, man.
Well, I mean, especially...
like, that's some top-level shit, bro. And then he comes out with a piano and he starts playing it.
Yeah.
And he's like, man, before me, jazz was in trash, bro. And the piano starts playing itself. Yeah. And he's just smoking. It's great. I love that sketch, man, for SNL. But yeah, that was kind of the backlash of it, was like this idea of like these two white people coming in and being like, yo, jazz, let me teach you what jazz really is about.
And then, I mean, especially, you know, I always kind of think it's a problem when, I don't know. I just don't like when movies are like, oh, this new music is so trash. Like, oh man, this new style of music, like how they clearly are like. And again, like I get like the whole. I mean, the Start a Fire song is not a great song, but it's a pop song.
I like that song.
It's actually a better song than like most of what plays on the radio, definitely. But it's just funny how like that is what's seen as, oh, this is the opposition. This is what we have to fight against. Like, same thing with A Star Is Born, man. I think A Star Is Born did like the same. Again,
yeah.
like the whole like pop
Why'd you
music.
do that that. I can't lie. I was like, oh. I was on Bradley Cooper's side, bro.
No, man. I hated that Lady Gaga because to me,
I was on his side because I was like, oh, that song.
But they made
do that to me.
Yeah, that was a shitty song. But
I was like, this is a shitty song.
They essentially made Lady Gaga be Lady Gaga.
They did,
which to me I didn't like because I love the old Lady Gaga way more than like the new Lady Gaga.
I thought it was a funny scene though where he's all like, I just got to tell you, honey. And he's like, what? What's wrong? And he's like, I don't know. Why are you talking about them ass and them jeans? I laughed. I was like, what? And she's like, what? What are you talking about? And he's like, I was ass and them jeans. Like, what's that about? What are you trying to say?
Bradley Cooper in that movie had the single best voice I think I've ever heard in my entire life. Oh, man.
And she's like, yeah, I understand. It's like freaking I Am Groot, bro. It's like, I don't know what you're saying. She's like, yeah, well, my honey's trying to say.
when Bradley Cooper is Sam Elliott or that was really, I was like, damn,
there's one scene where I literally think he didn't say anything. Like, there's one scene where I think they did it on purpose. Where Bradley was like, all right, I'm gonna really do it. And he's literally like, no, I'm trying to come to her. And that's all he says. And the audience laughed because I was like, yeah, you didn't say anything, bro.
Oh, man, I swear.
I want to make a tweet about it. Like, Bradley Cooper, blah, 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 blah. Oscar audiences, give him the gold.
Garble.
And the Oscar goes to.
He should do his whole Oscar speech like that.
Either way, yeah, I get what you're saying, especially when it comes to like that. Like, that's what they're saying that's too mainstream. It's like, bro, this is not even mainstream.
Especially when it's a black artist, John Legend. And then going back to Moonlight thing, we never actually ended up finishing, like, or comparing it to Moonlight and La La Land. But yeah, the optics of that whole Oscar race just looked bad, you know? Like,
it did.
So definitely the bias. For me, I thought the music was good. And we were talking about the backlash of, the singing. I think particularly people have problems with the singing. Yeah.
That's what I meant.
And, for me, I much prefer that actors are bad singers than singers
who dub.
100%. Yeah.
I'd rather see some average ass singing than dubbing. I hate dub singing.
Or even worse, I'd rather see a great actor do a musical than a great singer who can't act, Because I think that's been a big problem that Hollywood just can't seem to get over.
Sure.
I think Gaga was great in A Star Is Born.
There you go.
But she had acting experience before.
That's true.
But whereas I just don't think that more times than not, it just doesn't work for me. Like,
yeah, I don't know. I just feel like there's so much positive in this movie. It really is one of those movies that just had a big impact on me. And the music was great. The feel of it was great. The callbacks to it was throwback to like old school musicals while still being a modern musical while still having elements.
Singing in the Rain is the biggest, I think, American influence.
While still having moments of a modern musical, while still being outside of reality, while still being somewhat in reality. I loved it. I loved how it was straddling the edge of like a musical, a classic musical, in reality, out of reality kind of musical. I loved it. A lot of people criticized that too. They were like, "Oh, it didn't know what it wanted to be," and I was like, "Oh, that was my favorite part of it," because that was a criticism that I heard a lot. Was like, "Oh, La La Land didn't know what it wanted to be, or old or new or what? What are you trying to?" And I was like, "Oh, that's what made it cool. It was a hybrid.
Yeah,
it was like a throwback while still being modern, while having new original music." I adored this movie. Emma Stone is a treasure. I'm watching Maniac right now. I just finished it last night on Netflix.
I watched the first episode.
I think she's a treasure, man. I think she's a gangster. She's dope. And we saw Birdman recently for Iñárritu.
Yeah.
And even her in that movie, she's a gangster in that movie too. I was like, shit, she's dope. Like, she's just dope.
Yeah.
And I think she's dope. I think Ryan Gosling is a cool homie. And I like Ryan Gosling.
Cool.
I do. I think he's a cool guy. I like him a lot.
Hey.
And even though he's City of Stars.
City of Stars. He's like Bradley Cooper going to
seriously, bro. I'm like, project. Ryan, project. That's me the whole movie as I'm watching it, as a musical guy that I am.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, he's like He's like super quiet.
Yeah.
During his singing. Yeah, that's how he is. But either way, man, that's kind of my last thing on this movie is the fact that it balances so many different things, and it really painted an interesting picture of like the modern Hollywood tale, while still being a throwback to a classic musical.
Yeah, no, it wears its influences on its sleeves, I definitely think, and I think it intentionally is very much emulates, Singing in the Rain, like you said, Umbrellas of Chuchura, all of these musicals that Damien Chazelle has loved over the years. But it also takes it to like a postmodern extent to a certain extent too. It does. It is a little subversive. It is a little like takes his. I think a lot of people's main criticism is that the old time Philly stuff is taken from like the Singing in the Rain, like the American musical, whereas his version of Subversion comes from like the old French New Wave approach, particularly with Umbrellas of Chouchou and all these other French New Wave inspired movies. So he is kind of drawing from two different older influences and smashing them together. A lot of people don't like that. I think it's really cool.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
And you're right. A lot of people didn't like that, and I loved it.
Yeah, I think that's what I think to a certain extent. I almost appreciate older, newer filmmakers doing that more because a lot of times newer moviegoers and newer movie fans won't have the same kind of introduction or knowledge to those movies without La La Land, otherwise. So yeah, I mean, and a lot of people say, some of the framing and La La Land is a little weird. Some of the colors are a little off. Some people said, Damien Chazelle is a little more of a sloppier director than a lot of people like to give him credit for. I disagree with that criticism. I think that as a director, he's someone who cares less about the perfections and kind of highlights the imperfections to highlight the flaws of like the characters. And I think he does that in Whiplash as well, to a certain extent, kind of playing off of the Miles Teller like idea and persona of what Miles Teller represents, and kind of plays off that and builds into his character.
Yeah, I think everything he does is very specific and overt in what he's trying to do, especially when it comes to the camera work, right? I mean, obviously his name is what, Linus something?
I can't remember. But I think
and he won Best DP that year for the Oscars
cinematography.
Too. And I give it to him, man. I thought it was dope. I liked what he was trying to do with the tracking shots, with the one-ers, with the camera whips. A lot of people don't like those camera whips. I love those camera whips.
Oh, Another Day of Sun. We gotta talk about that, man. I mean, that's the hardest opening
that goes hard
sequence. And I drive on that intersection 105 110.
And do you sing it every time you pass by?
And I usually try and play it when I'm man, it's another day of sun. No, I'm not gonna sing, but that to me is that's a hard way of opening a movie.
I love it. I love
very accurate too.
I love Someone in the Crowd. I think that's dope.
Someone in the Crowd.
Someone in the crowd can be the one you're looking for. That one. I love Emma Stone's Audition.
Yeah.
I love that song, man. I love that.
And that song, I think, highlights the underlying thing because she talks about this aunt who, she mentions it before in the movie.
Yeah.
But, to me, I kind of read it as the aunt being kind of the metaphor, the overarching metaphor for creativity, who she draws her inspiration from.
Yeah.
She and particularly in the song, she talks about how, like, she like she stayed in Paris and then kind of saw this new life, but drowned in the alcohol from not, for wanting to live something, outside of the norm. And it's just interesting that whole metaphor of creativity, of what binds us, of what fuels us to try and get into this horrible this horrible industry of film.
Yeah. I love the line, she leapt without looking. She leapt without looking.
Right.
I love that line. I was like, yeah, that's kind of what she's trying to say throughout the entire movie.
Right.
Leaping without looking. It's the idea of not having certainty, but still kind of risking everything to do what you want to do. And I love it. I love how cliche it is. It's so cliche. Yeah. I adore it. So, yeah, I don't know. Those are my thoughts. What about you, RB3? Your final thoughts?
La La Land's dope. Yeah.
La La Land's gangster, man. All right, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed our episode on Damien Chazelle. Let us know what is your favorite movie. Let us know what's your favorite moment of La La Land. Or ask us a question specifically about whether it be the Oscar race, whether it be about First Man. about anything you want in general. Let us know in the comments down below, and we will be reading it on next week's episode. Either way, guys, from the Media Death Podcast, I am Ace.
This is RB3.
And we are peacing out. Peace out, guys.